The year is 2003, South Africa, Johannesburg to be precise. The air of Kwaito is kind of starting to dwindle away in the face of a new era of dance music, while at the very same time, the resurgence of South African rap is actually proving to be a formidable cultural phenomenon. We're seeing the rise of rappers who are becoming more self-aware of the environment that they work in. Thus, the main complaint that's been resonating out of the ears of those who were not heads, that Asimo statesman um, is heeded and I suppose channeled into an era of MCs who, to be apt about it, are now sensitized by the locality of where they come from. We're seeing acts like Amu, Squatter Camp, Cashless Society, and all the other rappers of the quote-unquote golden era of South African rap come to the fore in ways that are classically labeled vernacular, which is not a term I truly appreciate a lot, especially in its current use, because it kind of creates this impression that it was necessary for them to lock themselves inside their own cultural identities. And I don't think that's what vernacular really means. I think when you look at the word vernacular, it's being aware of what comes out of your immediate environment. Influence comes two ways. There are things that greet you from afar. There are things that come at you from the very presence of where you stand and live. And I think vernacular is the latter. It's learning how to appreciate the things that come from your immediate setting and how to expand them into the rest of the world. Enter Optical Illusion, a group who were at that time pretty much making what could be termed boom bap rap. You're talking about your high thumping beats, sample based, and pretty much a looping of both sound and lyricism meshed into one dynamic package, which is kind of solely meant and built for the hypermasculine crotch grabbing cipher. So as a result, boom bap doesn't translate well outside of, well, men in general. Men who like hip hop in particular, men who are interested in rap, men who are interested in lyrical rap, men who are interested in the lyrical rap that is mainly self-referential and at the very most is a challenge to the imaginary whack MC. And Optical Ill releases the definitive, which, looking at it from the year 2003 and now, one can't help wonder how it's evolved. The definitive is seen as one of the foremost influential rap albums in terms of, again, this word, boom bap, that sound. Um, this term is one of the terms that genuinely do come from the hip hop space. It isn't some kind of journalistic convention which was shoved down the throats of hip hop heads, like the term conscious or gangster rap, or any other kind of label which seeks to segment the kinds of rap apart from each other in contradictory ways, creating oppositional markets and competition. Boom bap was just the way of describing the gutter, grimy sound which is associated with the New York scene as it was kind of evolving to find its way into the 90s. Names such as Pete Rock, DJ Premier, Q-Tip are mainly seen as godfathers of really honing the sound to where it was born and to taking it where it is today. Now, for young South Africans, Battle Cat, Genocide, Logic, Golden Shovel, many would say a little extra is Mawetu. Enamored by the JSEC culture of hip hop, basically cultivated and groomed by the cypher, which means they were rappers for other rappers. They released this project into the hands of hip hop heads in particular, but with hopes that the everyday South African might resonate. And when I look at the way that the album courses through its sound, one of the things that I'm able to pick up is this had to be, and he'll tell me if he's watching this, the moment where Battle Cat, as a rapper, producer, and pretty much the creative director of the Optical Illusion team in terms of sculpting the sound, in the similar vein as a RZA would be to the Wu-Tang Clan and a Q-Tip would be to a Tribe Called Quest, is somebody who stands at the center of what these brothers are trying to do. And I think back then, they weren't trying to do much other than rap. There weren't any aspirations beyond kicking a couple of dope verses and just seeing the eyes of the rappers they admire sparkle at the scale of the young ones coming up. You see this particularly in the features that they choose. This is an era where rappers like Dumi and Zubs were seen not so much as peers, but were beginning to elevate to the level of established artists who are examples for how a rapper in South Africa who prefers the medium of the English language can translate in a way that is referential to our condition. And I think it's no wonder that these are the rappers who are not only featured, but in a way kind of honored. I mean, Dumi even gets his own track. It's kind of an ode to the young guns in a way where the general salutes, but also leads and directs to what he feels are particularly the ills of South Africa, but how that trickles into rap as it tries to navigate itself. So what I'm basically trying to say is, these were young cats who were trying to prove themselves to their peers and their OGs alike. And at that age, you hear that the lyricism hasn't rung to anything beyond that. There isn't any kind of quotables that we could feel succinctly move down our spine in ways that feel very eternal. The raps were locked in an era that was specific to what they were trying to do. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? It might be bad in terms of the fact that it's aged the album in a way where the rapping in and of itself isn't that interesting. But it could be viewed as a good thing because it is what it was and it will forever be that. And the only way you could listen and appreciate to this project is under that historical context. If you don't get who Optical Ill was back then, you won't get why they rap the way that they do. But if you do, you'll appreciate it. It'll kind of be swinging down memory lane at where hip-hop used to be and its ambitions to be something greater. Getting to what I feel is the highlight of the project is that throughout this project, there is an incessant need that you feel here and there in certain artistic choices where Battle Cat wants to go beyond the typical let's loop a sample and let's throw in some killer drums and a bass line. There was a whisper of it needed to be more musical. It needed to understand how the melodic structure of song making and writing and arrangement make a song beyond its time pole. And you see this in the production. It's things that are as simple as the intentional guitar riffs on the very famous hit single from the project, Move It Up. How just adding that guitar adds an organic jazziness to a typical boom bap beat, which would have been dope, but now it becomes an orchestratic affair, where on the one side you have these aggressive horns that are blowing through the speakers, but you have this calm, soothing guitar. And I think it's this contrast of the organic, warm tones contrasted by the rough drums that are kind of the consistent thread in this project, and that made me, in retrospect, look at this and go, God damn it, this is why Battle Cat is revered as one of the most important producer beat makers in South African hip-hop. It is this insistence on going beyond this very spirally place that a lot of boom bap tends to be in, where it's literally boom, chair, boom, 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 chair, boom, 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 chair for eternity. And on top of that, MCs just kind of rapping about the same things about themselves and their own kind of artistic self-embellishment. But again, if it wasn't for the production, this album would have been dead in the water by a couple of years. But I'm able to go back, and we're able to go years later and appreciate this project and say, bravo. Because here we see a moment of growth. And I think the young ones will be able to kind of lean and glean that by listening to this. It's looking at where our pioneers chose to go beyond what the norm was. And here is kind of the streak of musical sensitivity, and it's also the streak of self-awareness of making music that is for your people before you try to pander to some kind of Americanized foreign audience who you feel represent this kind of hip-hop centric atmosphere. So ultimately, looking at these tracks as they move and they succeed, I think this classic, and yes it is a classic, is not so much a sonic testament that has stood the test of time because the songs were so massively put together, but it's a lesson in progress. It teaches us where they decided to go right and were able to kind of savor the palette of where they went wrong in many instances. So shout out to Optical Ill. And before I conclude this review, I want to go into the chemistry of the group. Now, one of the glaring things in listening to Optical Ill's rapping is they hadn't yet, with this project, found a dynamic that gelled in a way that was cohesive. I mean, there were particular rappers who were just starkly a little bit more advanced than others. Particularly Golden Shovel, with his kind of booming, godly bass and his, insistence on the complex imagery, set himself apart. Battlecat, with his kind of loungy rasp, is also kind of stepping into this wave of relaxed, cool rap, and I feel like these two create an interesting, beautiful dynamic together that when you factor in Genocide and Logic, who feel more like the fillers to the actual bricks. And as a result, they can drown in a lot of tracks because I, for one, feel it was such a great thing that Genocide, aka Tumelo, right? Shout out to Tumelo, decided to really go more into singing because his rapping felt trapped vocally. He had a lot of raps and punchlines which had potential to really stand out, but the resonance of his voice is soft-spoken, and I think he was in a place where he couldn't make it work, especially amongst MCs whose voices, including Logic himself, were more dominant than he was. Logic, on the other hand, just couldn't really stream together lyrics which were coherent and clinical enough to stand with the others in a way that complemented them. So in a way, from this project to their later project, The Offering, they improved way more as a dynamic. And I think, again, the things that were noticeable here were later repaired in a way that is remarkable and in a way that allows us that as we move from tracks like Evergreen, 100 Times, and of course the classic Move It Up, and we go to the MC with Mawetu and X-Ray there, it presents itself in a way where the brotherhood and the fraternity of rapping is all that mattered. So ultimately, this is a project for remembering that time if you are identified with it. So it's pretty much an OG's pleasure. And if you identify yourself as a long-standing fan of the SA rap tradition, this will definitely echo a lot of the sentiments of, man, we've come a long way, and we couldn't have done it without these impactful brothers who added and who took risks. My name is VJ, the brother from the ancient mother. Do I even rate this? Because y'all like numbers. I would say, in its time, it was possibly a 5, 6 out of 10. Right now, for me, it's an easy 7.5. sheer significance alone, it being in its time capsule and being able to kind of weather the storm, and listening to it today, and the mastering and the mixing, and again, this larger than the boom bap box approach to the production is what allows this project, on the level of legacy and technicality, to really become something beyond the average. And that's what happens. A lot of you motherfuckers don't understand that some music grows through the times. In fact, all music grows through the times, and it is this being subjected to culture and growth and evolution that can sometimes take projects which might have not made too much sense back then in the context, glean themselves into something a little bit more appreciative. So I think this is one of the examples of that. In the light of where boom bap is today, or maybe the lack of boom bap in South Africa and Africa at large, this is a project that stands as an example of how to approach African boom bap. And it couldn't have been done if it wasn't for Optical Illusion. So thank you for giving us the definitive. Appreciate you.